Cool. So getting started, all right? The data on Kubernetes community. Everyone who's here is probably well familiar with what Kubernetes is. And if you aren't, that's okay too, right? You'll learn throughout this presentation that my role in the community is quite specific. It's quite unique. And there are different ways to get involved. And we'll be talking about all of those in a little bit, all right? So the data on Kubernetes community, as Olivia mentioned, we're going to be talking about, what it is, what we're doing, why it exists, and how you can get involved, all right, based on the different activities that we have going on. We are a very, very active community, so there's lots of different ways for you to interact, for you to learn, for you to share, to teach, and help us grow. So you might be wondering, once again, she did give me a pretty good introduction, all right? CNCF Ambassador, that's true, leading the data on Kubernetes community. But in terms of my background, all right, I am originally from the United States. I'm from Northern California, but I've been living in Spain for the last 10 years. So connected in the same time zone is kind of nice. Sometimes I have folks that are in very different parts of the world, which means we get to wake up very early or stay up very late. I came into this position not from having a technical background, right? I did not study computer science. I didn't study computer engineering. I got my degree actually in what's called religious studies, right? And not to become a priest, but because of being interested in anthropology, sociology, history, psychology, etc. So I graduated with that degree. I left the United States about 12 years ago to study Arabic. I went to Egypt. That's where I met my wife, and she's from Spain. Anyway, long story short, been living in Spain for 10 years, got into tech 6 years ago, but always on what I call the human side, all right? So when I say that, what do I mean? We can talk about technologies, we can talk about innovation, but at the end of the day, we're really talking about people, all right? Cultural changes in mindset, the different ways we do things, which is exactly what we're addressing in the data on Kubernetes community, all right, is a new technology, a new way of doing things that we're realizing more and more, talking to Fabian earlier, that more and more companies and individuals out there, we realize have actually been working with this for quite some time, but we encounter difficulties on an organizational level, on a human level, when it comes to implementing some of these things, right? So I started working in tech 6 years ago on the talent management side, things related to communication, event organization, things of that nature, to in the past when we had in-person meetups, physical events, things like that. Also working with different local universities and anyway, lots of different things related to that kind of stuff. About 3 years ago, I started to work as a freelancer, doing the same thing, but for different companies. And as a result, found myself in a position where a friend of mine had started the data on Kubernetes community last year in July, and he contacted me in August and was not going to be able to continue. So I had to think about it. And eventually I said, okay, yes. My knowledge about Kubernetes was based on working very closely with the DevOps team in my previous company. And they started using Kubernetes in 2017, 2018. At that time, we were simultaneously using Mesos from Apache and also Kubernetes. So we got to see the technological change happening there as well and some of the different options. Sometimes folks will say that not necessarily the best technology wins, but who am I to judge, all right? So like I said, as a result, that's how I got invited in to participate in the data on Kubernetes community. And since then, I've been leading the community since last year in September. Our community got integrated into the CNCF ecosystem earlier this year because basically they realized the stuff that we're working on is cloud native, open source technologies that very much have to do with the Kubernetes ecosystem. So it made sense for us to start collaborating more directly. Because of that, I applied to be a CNCF ambassador. I did not get accepted the first time. I was encouraged to apply again, and I got accepted. And so since then, I've been as active as possible in lots of different things related to contributor experienced storytelling, obviously organizing lots of sessions for the data on Kubernetes community, also doing some really fun sessions for students, for the CNCF students group. Big shout out to all the folks involved there. So anyway, just trying to be as proactive as possible. And another thing that you'll see there is on Cloud Native TV, all right? So cloudnative.tv, CNCF has a bunch of new sort of like TV programs, and I will be leading one called Art as Code, where we will be talking about the intersections between art and technology, right? You'll see a little bit later on, a big thing in our community, and also in the picture of me there, is mixing these kind of different things, whether it's with music, whether it's with drawing, different things like that. But there are lots of folks out there that are creative that have different things that they can share. So you'll be hearing about that soon on Twitter and different places. So to continue with the presentation, to get more into the nitty gritty, all right, so why DOK? So the Data on Kubernetes community was started because of realizing that there wasn't a space where practitioners could come together to share their experiences and help others troubleshoot and navigate the difficulties of working with storage and databases on Kubernetes. All right. A lot of folks up until now have had the sort of association with Kubernetes as Kubernetes stateless. Don't put your data in there. It doesn't make sense. You're going to have problems. It's too difficult. Kelsey Hightower has been a very prominent advocate of maintaining everything statelessly up until now. If you look at some of the tweets he had in June talking about how now even Oracle databases can be brought onto Kubernetes using what's called el carro, which means the car. Anyway, so it's interesting to see these paradigmatic shifts. But like I said, we have the idea of the Data on Kubernetes community is because it is challenging. Let's create a space, a vendor neutral space, all right? So not just being driven by one company with one product or service, but by lots of different companies so we can hear different perspectives of all the different things that are involved in that journey, right? Because when we're talking about data, if we talk about Kubernetes, it's already a big topic. We talk about data, seems like a big topic. There are lots of different areas we can explore. It could be networking, it could be analytics, it could be machine learning, artificial intelligence, it can be storage, it can be security. Predominantly, we find lots of conversations about storage and databases, and through that also about operators. But of course, there are lots of different elements that are a part of this whole sort of area, if we want to call it that. So, like I said, that's how this sort of got started. And so, how can we solve this problem? Like I said, by creating a space where different people from different countries can interact with each other. The idea is that in 2 years from now, we know that this is still early days for this technology, but that in a year, 2 years from now, we're going to be hearing about a lot more companies, vendors, as well as end users who will be sharing their experiences so that this becomes something that's a little bit easier to do. Big shout out to Alessandro, awesome person, also CNCF Ambassador, killing in Amsterdam. And also a big Lebowski fan, man of my heart. Anyways, like I said, that's what we're kind of after. And so how do we do that? By doing lots of different live streams, right? Lots of live streams, lots of different kinds of content, so that depending on what your experience is or what your level of interest is, that there will be some kind of content that will be good for you, all right? So how do we do this? Our community has grown quite a lot, right? When I got started, we were around 120 people in Slack. Now we're around 1,400. Also got lots of people in LinkedIn, almost 2,000 subscribers in YouTube. Anyway, all those kind of vanity metrics. More importantly, though, what kind of audience are we trying to serve? The very folks that are going to be working with data on Kubernetes, right? So in terms of profile, we're going to be thinking about DBAs, about SREs, about DBREs. That might be a new term, database reliability engineers, DevOps, all the different folks that can sort of overlap in this technological stack in this area, and that are going to need the necessary skills to be able to work with these kind of situations that involve running data on Kubernetes. So when we talk about education, all right, as a second point, we're talking about let's get the content out there, right? In as many, like I said, in as many different formats as possible. Some of our videos are more fireside chats, others are more deep technical dives. We insist on trying to avoid just vendor pitches. We want to be having technical talks for a technical audience. And so in less than a year, well, just around a year, we've had over 75 live streams, including about 20 that were done in our co-located event in KubeCon that we did earlier in May. And Tim, who will be speaking after me, has been an amazing community member who's also been quite active in giving different talks about different topics, such as Argo versus Airflow, different things of that nature, right? Always with a very, very strong data focus. We also try to have content that's beginner friendly because we understand that there's a steep learning curve. Remember, I'm not a practitioner, so I'm going through that learning process as well. So we very much want to make this as comfortable as possible for different folks to get involved. In terms of our ecosystem, we interact with end users to hear what it's like when they're actually consuming these technologies and the benefits that are being provided. Because one thing is to answer the question, what is data on Kubernetes? Another thing is to answer, how is data on Kubernetes done? But a third question that can even go before, I don't know if you're familiar with Simon Sinek, but the wonderful thing of starting with why, right? So why data on Kubernetes? So when we get these end users coming in, it's when we really see the value that's being added to their organizations, and that's not from a vendor's perspective, all right? Of course, we also have the vendors, because the vendors and end users interacting and learning from each other creates a very, very healthy mixture. particularly, as I said earlier, that we are a vendor neutral space, right? So as you'll see, some of the names here are direct competitors, right? Folks that are making databases, folks that are working on, different things related to infrastructure, all these different kinds of enterprises that are involved in working with open source technologies. They all have a welcome space in our community, as long as they're not heavily pushing products and that they're helping educate folks on how to work with data on Kubernetes, right? So that's sort of background about how does it work. Stuff that you'll see as well too that makes us a little bit unique is trying to make these concepts more accessible and reachable through having things like artwork. We have a wonderful artist named Angel who lives here in Spain. And every time we do live streams, he'll be doing an artistic depiction of what's going on. And so at the end of the session, then we have a nice visual summary of the different topics that were mentioned. The one at the top was from yesterday's session that we did about running production grade databases on Kubernetes. And the one that's below is actually with a colleague of Tim's who works at Full Stack. Shout out to Weard, who gave a talk with us last week. All right. So like I said, this is another way of getting community members more involved so that it's something that's really, really shared. All right. And this isn't the only example of that happening. We have other folks who've been involved in different ways, and I'll get to that in a second. So we can keep moving. Another thing, like I said, about our identity, if you check us out on YouTube, if you check us out on Twitter, you'll see artwork, you'll definitely see music, you'll see rap videos. We try to have summaries using rap to that I will do. And anybody else wants to rap, you are more than invited. We will provide you with whatever resources you need. And so that's another thing that we do. We also have a DOK coloring book that was made by one of our other artists, Nelly. And so, like I said, the idea behind this is that we understand that these concepts can be tough and challenging. So we feel that by celebrating them, right, through art, through music, through other collaborative efforts, that we make them more accessible and we make the conversations maybe less scary in terms of trying to get started out on this journey. So that's been our approach, and it's something that we're definitely going to stick with. Once again, just to repeat, in terms of our identity, we're vendor neutral. We're now opening up our community as well and creating a governing board to have different voices that will be steering the direction of the community in order to be building the conversations that will decide the next decade of data. Right? That's how we're trying to frame this. Also with working groups, right, that can be related to different things that are more specific. And then also, once again, continuous interaction with end users. Speaking of which, in case I forget, we will be doing a co-located event in KubeCon in October, and we have an open CFP for anyone who wants to give a talk, assuming that it's related to working with data on Kubernetes, and we're prioritizing talks that focus on end users, all right? So if you want more information about that, please let me know. I'll be happy to share that. It's also pinned on our Twitter, and if you need any information, just jump into Slack, and we'll be happy to help you out. Good. So let's keep cracking on. Luckily, I am not alone in this adventure, all right? These are just two of the folks that I'm working with, but there are a lot of other people that are involved here. Melissa Logan has over 2 decades of experience working on tech strategy and marketing and leading initiatives that are related to open source, and also has a lot of experience working with women who are very active in open source. So anyway, Melissa is a total rock star who makes my life a lot easier. Another wonderful person who has joined our team is Sylvain Kalash, who is an SRE turned content creator. He's living in San Francisco and very, very active there with all the things going on related to tech. So he's been, like I said, there is no I in team. We all very much work together and progressively adding value to what the community can provide. And just as important, the most recent addition to our team are 4 young, wonderful people. You only see 3 in this picture. We have the best interns in the universe, right? We have Von Chicka in the top left corner. You have some crazy American guy with the clown nose on the right. And then below, you have Kewalia with the sunglasses and Kunal Verma. It's been very important also interacting with the CNCF students community to get these interns working with us so we can see how data on Kubernetes looks from a complete beginner's perspective, all right? So apart from that, they're also very active in helping facilitate the live streams that we're doing. They don't know this, but they will in the future be hosting them themselves because they're more than ready to do so. So that's been a recent addition, and I recommend to all of you work with young people as often as possible because the energy level just goes up and up, all right? So that's another interesting thing about stuff that we're doing. Another thing that we really believe, like I said, is paying it forward. You will notice that it's partially because of Laundry Day, but today I'm wearing my Last Mile t-shirt. As I said previously, we interact with the CNCF students group. We're doing sessions at least once every 2 weeks with them. We have one tomorrow, actually, with Logan Kilpatrick, who's very active in the Julia programming language, but also knows a lot about machine learning and Kubernetes. The Last Mile is an organization that teaches programming to incarcerated and informally incarcerated folks in the United States. And so we've been collaborating with them through donations. And in the future, we hope to be collaborating with them on educational resources and mentoring for the folks that are in that program. We also welcome first-time contributors. If you're totally new to all this kind of stuff, we have resources to make this onboarding process easier. So we're very, very much committed to that. And there are lots of different ways that folks can get involved. Let's take a look. Sorry about that. So, like I said, regarding next steps, we got our next co-located event that will be coming up in October, on October 12th. We've got the CFP open until September 1st. If you want more info about that, please just let me know. We're also working on a research report to have clearer information about what exactly the data on Kubernetes landscape looks like. That will be coming out in KubeCon. In the meantime, we have lots more sessions. We've got a lot of sessions planned for this month. For next month, we've got at least 2 sessions planned for every week, and in some cases 3 or 4. We have DOK projects that are ongoing, all right? We're trying to get our wraps put onto a database that we're going to be running on Kubernetes so we can see a real-life example of how that looks that will be built by the community. We're also building out a community dictionary of common terms that we find in the data on Kubernetes world so that all these things can become more accessible. And getting just to my very, very last one. So if you want to get involved, like I said, there are lots of ways. Easy way to get involved, jump in our Slack, reach out, happy to talk to you. If you want to give a talk, we're always interested, as long as, like I said, it's not a product pitch, related to data on Kubernetes, and as often as possible, get that end user angle in there. Attending sessions and asking questions. If you play an instrument and would like to collaborate, I can honestly say that Tim's sister is going to be performing with us in KubeCon in October. So like I said, this is not a joke. We are very serious. If you want to get involved with us in a creative way, that's another way to get involved too. And most of all, just be a friendly person, be open-minded. And that's really all we're asking. In terms of information, like I said, we're pretty easy to find. Doc.community is the website. We're on YouTube, Data on Kubernetes Community, Twitter, Doc Community. I'm Bart. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's pretty much all I got. I probably went a little bit overtime, for which I apologize because the organizers suffer a lot when folks go overtime. But anyway, thank you all very much. Looking forward to interact with you. I'm really lucky as well, too, that Tim's going to be giving his talk today because this is the way that you can see one of the concepts, data ops, which is a great example of cloud-native technologies when we're thinking about working with data on Kubernetes. So you'll get to see this kind of in action through that. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to you, Olivia. Thanks to everyone for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the talks today.
Cool. So thank you so much, Bart, for your speech. It's great that I also got an insight into the data on Kubernetes community, as also I'm not from the tech side. So thank you very much for that.
Good.
So regarding our community, are there any questions? We have opened up the chat window. So if there are any comments or questions, they should pop up on the screen.
And if there are no questions, that's totally fine. If you don't have to ask today, you can ask tomorrow. You can ask whatever you want. Just know that we're always open and happy to help folks as well too. Sometimes even if our community isn't necessarily the right place, we are more than happy to recommend other resources or other places so that people get the right information and the right click, we can say, with the right matching with what it is that they're looking for. So like I said, totally open to take questions now or as well as later.
Okay, so however, I'm not quite sure if this is related to your topic. However, maybe we can also discuss it. It's about, I will just...
oh yeah. Happy to address that. So career and growth opportunities, pretty easy. All right. In our community, there are jobs being shared all the time. This is something that you'll realize in the SRE or DBRE space is that there are way more job openings than there are people to fill them. However, you do need, a certain level of experience and contact with different kinds of technologies. But like what I would say to that is the question is more so what kind of a career are you pursuing? And based on that career, what kind of information would be valuable? We've also had sessions as well too about getting certified as Kubernetes certified Kubernetes administrator. or developer. So like I said, for folks that are more interested in that route, we have a couple of talks, but there are lots of talks that you can find out there from the CNCF. I see another question. So DOK is about more than just SQL databases, but data in general. How do you find data in your community? That's a really good question. I think Tim would be able to answer that much better than I would. But like I said, data in a common traditional sense in which we encounter it, yes, I would say it's predominantly focused on databases and storage. But then there are other types of areas where we start to see that, whether it's streaming applications through Kafka. Of course, there's always going to be a database somewhere in that equation. But like I said, we've seen different areas. Fabian, you could probably answer that question as well too, maybe even better than I can.
So about opportunities in DevOps and SRE. So
no, about defining data. When we're talking about data on Kubernetes, that it's more than just SQL databases, but data in general. How would you, when you think about data on Kubernetes, what comes to mind?
What comes to mind? Okay, so definitely people are a whole lot of scared on data running simply anywhere. Dealing with hardware, dealing with storage is, I don't know, it scares people. I'm actually not sure why. My personal impression, it was way harder 10 years ago and even 5 years ago, where things like NFS and iSCSI and all those low-level protocols were of interest, and you had to operate clusters on your own. Today, the only cluster you probably operate is a Kubernetes cluster, and that's the only cluster you probably need because it's already totally capable of dealing with a multitude of storage backends. So you as a user simply, you're just telling the cluster what it should do, and it pretty much will do it. And my personal opinion and my personal experience over the last 3 to 4 years is that not only Kubernetes, but also all the storage backends and all the applications that are managing storage have become so stable in itself that you need to shake very hard on an application to make data corrupt or lose something. Not sure when I the last time restored something from a backup. So my personal thingy is to put as much of the data into Kubernetes and have it manage that. In some occasions, we still go back to using managed databases and feed them to the applications, but only if it's for an SLA reason, where we say we don't want to deal with the responsibility, but that's in almost no cases anymore. With the advent of microservices, definitely hosting a database inside Kubernetes is a no-brainer these days, because most of the Helm charts of the CNCF applications come with embedded Postgres or stuff like that, where it's just being done for you and it's super stable. At least if you're not operating in, I don't know, petabyte scale or whatever. But for the typical doings, managed databases, managed, I don't know, RabbitMQ, managed KV stores or stuff like that, just do it in Kubernetes. Spin up a container alongside your deployment or your stateful set, and you're definitely good to go.
Very, very good. That's a very thorough answer. Just to answer a couple of the other questions really quickly, for the person who's asking how to get more involved around DevOps, Kubernetes, etc., this is a great question. Community is a great way to do it, and don't feel like because of a lack of experience that you can't get involved. All right, that's what's really, really important to keep in mind. There is that you do not need to be an expert. There are first-time issues, there are beginner issues that you can start resolving. One of the best things to do, though, read the documentation. Right? Reading the documentation, even if you only spend 5 minutes doing it so that you arrive with some kind of background info. When folks come in and just say, like, I want an internship or how do I get a job? It's like, well, that's kind of, happy to still answer that, but I'm probably going to redirect you to some other resources so you can be better informed and ask more specific questions. Any kind of technology that you're into, literally go to Google and type CNCF JavaScript, CNCF Python. You will find tons of stuff. Google is your friend, all right? If you spend 10 minutes Googling, you will be shocked at the amount of information that you can find. So I would say to that person who asked that question, if you want more information, because I've answered this a fair amount of times, please jump into our Slack. I'd be happy to share some resources with you, either in the CNCF Slack, Kubernetes Slack, DOK Slack, doesn't matter. Now, going to the next question about how much interaction has there been between DOK and the core Kubernetes, that's a really good question. So like I said, since we got integrated with the CNCF, but even before that, because one of the driving forces behind our community was Maya Data, that's very involved in OpenEBS. And so since the very beginning, like that sort of cloud native mentality and being aware of the CNCF projects has been very much present. Now, relating to specific things about data on Kubernetes, there is SIG storage, and so part of that area is somewhat covered in that sense. Could it be possible that there would be more room for things in the future? I think we're yet to see that. But in terms of interaction with CNCF projects, yesterday we did a live stream with the folks from Litmus Chaos because they had version 2.0 coming out, which is really, really exciting. We have a meetup next week with some folks from Kepton. We've actually had a maintainer from Kepton previously. We had a session about Thanos last week. So like I said, we're very, very much trying to interact with that CNCF landscape as much as possible because there are lots of projects that are directly related to the technologies that we're talking about. So it's a win-win. People get to find out about their projects and we get to bring those projects and raise awareness inside our community. That's a very good question. And now we probably need to move on to the next speaker, I imagine. So I probably need to be quiet and disappear.
Exactly. Cool. So thank you very much, Bart, for your talk and for answering all the questions. Then I would say we'll move on to the next speaker. So I'll turn off the chat and I'll turn also off your stream, Bart. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.